In the days following the attack on the school, you were on Twitter casting doubt that a US strike was responsible for blowing up a school full of children in Minab. A preliminary US internal military investigation confirms it was a US missile. Do you now acknowledge that you were wrong, that the US was responsible for this horrific massacre?
Hold on. So first off, massacre implies intent.
That is a former Pentagon official trying to redefine the word massacre live on television after his own government's investigation confirmed what happened. This is one debate. 15 minutes, and by the end, you will understand exactly what this war actually was. Here is what you need to know. In mid-2025, the United States launched Operation Epic Fury, a military campaign against Iran that the administration said would take days. It lasted over 100. The stated justification was preventing an imminent Iranian nuclear weapon. But before a single bomb dropped, US intelligence had already assessed that Iran was not actively building one. Tonight's guest, David Roches, spent decades shaping Pentagon policy on the Gulf. He wrote an op-ed calling this war, in his words, imperfect, but a success. Mehdi Hasan brought him on Jazeera's head-to-head to defend that claim in front of a live studio audience and a panel of regional experts. What followed is 15 minutes of the most direct confrontation you will see between a journalist and a former defense official this year.
So there are 4 objectives going in. I measured it on its own terms. So first off, regime change was not the aim of this campaign. So there were 4 objectives. The first is to destroy the air defense network. That has pretty much been done, and when it was trying to be reconstituted, we saw the Israeli strikes were aimed at that. The second was to set back the nuclear program, preferably destroy it, to a point where it cannot be easily reconstituted. The third was to degrade or destroy Iran's drone and missile capability. We have not seen militarily significant missile launches. And then the fourth was to deplete the regime, particularly the internal security aspects of the regime, so that if there is an uprising, it wouldn't go through.
Notice something here. Regime change was never an official objective. So when the war drags past its original 2-week estimate and into its 5th month, success gets quietly redefined around whatever was actually achieved, not what was originally promised.
Iran still has 70% of its pre-war missile inventory, 90% of its underground missile storage, and of course almost 1,000 pounds of highly enriched uranium. The US killed Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei and replaced him with, drumroll, Ayatollah Khamenei.
These figures came from US intelligence itself, not from Iranian state media, not from speculation. If the goal was to significantly degrade Iran's capability, these are the numbers that test that claim directly.
And hold on.
Unfortunately, I've got more.
Hold on.
February the 28th.
Hold on.
No, you made a point. On February the 28th,
enough.
the Pentagon used missiles untested in combat, according to New York Times, that bombed a sports hall used by a female volleyball team. They killed 21 people, including multiple children. That was also on the first day of the war. We just didn't know about it till weeks later because the United States government covered it up. It required the New York Times to use satellite imagery to find this out.
I am unfamiliar with that instance, but I will tell you that if your crack research team gets on it, you will see that there were instances where the besieged moved from their headquarters into sports halls as sheltering positions.
This sounds like a very Israeli argument here, that they brought it on themselves with human shields.
That's not what I'm saying.
In fact, here's what you did say, David. You said on Twitter,
yes,
Wikipedia says the Minab school is located 600 meters from the headquarters of the IRGC Navy Asif Brigade and used to be part of the base.
Yes.
Which sounds like you're justifying the massacre of kids by saying, well, the military base was nearby, so it's their fault.
This particular strike was confirmed using satellite imagery analysis by the New York Times, not initially disclosed by the Pentagon. A former senior Pentagon official, asked directly about it on live television, said he was simply unfamiliar with it.
I would point out to you that U.S. Marine Corps base in Quantico, Virginia, is very close to the Crossroads Elementary School.
Yeah.
If the Iranians or one of their proxies, God forbid, bombed Crossroads Elementary School and said, well, it was the U.S. Marine Corps' fault for building a base near the school, we would all condemn that. So would you, wouldn't you?
This comparison is the core of the entire argument over civilian casualties in this war, where the proximity to a military installation justifies a strike on a school, regardless of which side of the conflict you are evaluating.
Did you really come to a public gathering to refer to 120 dead kids as collateral damage?
Look, that might be it might be, I said the word tragic as well, but that is what it is.
Collateral damage, 120 Iranian kids killed.
Of course, that is collateral damage. Collateral damage means the unintended consequences of a strike.
But you do realize, as I explained to David, it can still be a war crime.
I said in the very beginning that if you don't take your due diligence to attempt to take every measure to prevent civilian casualties, then it would be a war crime. I would assume that every attempt would have been taken to prevent that from happening.
So how did they end up killing 120 kids on
Yes,
what day?
I don't know why you would want to assume that that was the intent.
I never said a word about intent. I've been very clear.
Well,
It's not about
no,
intent.
no, but
it's about reckless behavior.
But
if you use the word
recklessness is
massacre, you
intent.
do assume an intent.
That's,
if you use the word massacre, you do assume an intent.
That's not true at all.
This panelist had previously called the strike on the school a legitimate target during a public rally in London. On air, he stood by the term collateral damage for 120 children. Whether that term applies legally depends on intent and recklessness, but the language itself reveals how differently this war is discussed depending on which side of it you are on. If you are following this timeline so far, hit like right now. It genuinely helps Veridical reach more people who want the full picture.
Let me bring in Barack Sina. The truth is, Barack, this was never about the Iranian nuclear threat, a lot of people would say. This is Israel's war. This is a war that Benjamin Netanyahu has wanted for 40 years. He did a video bragging that I've wanted this war for 40 years, and my friend Donald Trump did it for me. John Kerry came out and said, every president said no. We said no. Bush said no. Biden said no. Isn't it the case that this was always Netanyahu's war, and Trump is just the first US president dumb enough to give it to him?
I wouldn't assume that. Just because Israel consistently wanted it doesn't mean that it was the tail wagging the dog, that somehow Netanyahu imposed his will on President Trump. There's no evidence for that.
Not imposed, but lobbied, persuaded, cajoled, manipulated.
I think there's a lot of kind of conspiratorial thinking here.
Is it conspiracy when the State Department issued a statement on its website saying the US is, quote, engaged in this conflict at the request of Israel? Is it a conspiracy theory when the US government says it out loud?
Well,
This is documented. The US State Department's own language described American involvement as being at the request of Israel. Multiple prior administrations across both parties declined to take this specific military action for decades. What changed is the question this entire debate keeps circling back to.
The US even shot down an Iranian passenger airliner in 1988, killing 290 civilians, including more than 60 children, and George H.W. Bush said at the time he would never apologize for that. Surely you have to accept, David, that Iran has legitimate grievances against the United States as well.
Iran Air Flight 655 was shot down by Iran's Navy ship in 1988. All 290 people on board died. This is a documented historical event acknowledged by the US government, though formal responsibility was never accepted as an apology. It remains a foundational grievance in how Iran's government and many ordinary Iranians view US intentions.
We've had harrowing stories of cancer patients, kids not being able to get medicines because of these sanctions. That is collective punishment of the Iranian people for 40 years. You can't blame people for being pissed at America if you've got 40 years of horrific sanctions.
Iran is widely reported to be the second most sanctioned country in the world, after Russia. Multiple humanitarian organizations have documented medicine shortages linked to sanctions regimes. Even when medical goods are technically exempted on paper, the banking restrictions around them often make purchases practically impossible.
Israel is ethnically cleansing Shias in southern Lebanon. Right now, 1 million people displaced from their homes. I don't see the passion or condemnation from you on that.
Because
This exchange highlights a recurring pattern in the entire debate. Definitions of terms like ethnic cleansing, massacre, and collateral damage shift depending on which side of the conflict is being discussed.
Last question from me before we wrap. There's a poll done of 40,000 people regularly across 15 Arab states, and they asked them last year, who is the biggest threat to the region? 44% said Israel in number one place. 21% said the United States in second place. These are Arab countries.
Yeah.
And at 6% in third place, way behind, was Iran. That is a damning indictment of US and Israeli foreign policy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Damning indictment.
Well,
from the people on the ground.
100 days of war, a nuclear threat that US intelligence itself said did not exist at the time, a school destroyed on day one, a deal that was working, abandoned 7 years earlier, and a war that, according to the people living in the region, was started by the country least seen as the actual threat. None of this tells you what to think. It tells you what happened, documented on the record, much of it confirmed by the US government's own investigations. Was this war a success? That depends entirely on what you measure and who you ask. If this breakdown was worth your time, hit like. It takes 1 second and it genuinely helps. Subscribe to Veridical for more breakdowns like this every week. Drop in the comments. Was this war justified? See you in the next one.